Can I sit down? Is that okay? Can I sit down? Does that mean you're ready to film? Hi, I'm here. I'm alive. I'm Haley. This is Georgie, and we are dusting off the Soul YouTube channel for another weekend of the Knitweekend podcast. Another episode of the Knitweekend podcast. I'm a little nervous that messing up my words in the first, 30 seconds of filming does not bode well for this episode, but it's what you're gonna get. Also, Georgie's super vocal today. She is very excited, apparently, to be back and filming with you, or with me for you. So, thank you, first of all, to all the sweet friends who have reached out and messaged and asked if I am okay. And yes, I am. Summer was a little crazy, and I just decided to kind of give myself permission to take a step back, focus on some stuff here at the house and with my family, and just take a little pressure off myself. So I wish I could tell you that I've been on some grand adventures, and it really did start out that way. When I last spoke to you in May, I was gonna head out to Washington to spend time with family, see my dear friend Kat, and also kind of do a little yarn shop hopping during the Puget Sound yarn shop hop. I did all that. It was great, and I had filmed a lot to share with you guys, but now it feels a little stale and frankly 3 months old. So if you still want that yarn shop hop video, let me know and I'll pull that together. But we ended up hitting 9 yarn shops, so there was quite a bit, and definitely highlight of the trip was one, spending time with my dear friend Kat, who I had missed terribly being here in Nashville. And then also meeting a couple sweet folks who watch this channel. One of them being Vandy. Vandy bumped into us at La Mercerie. Well, she emailed me and said, hey, if you're gonna be here, let me know what time. So she bumped into us at La Mercerie, and then we hopped over to the Lamb and Kid. And Vandy, I'm gonna shock you. I did not go with an emerald green. I ended up with an electric blue. Yeah, I know, that was a twist near the end of the checkout experience. The other place that was just such a gem in the Puget Sound area, which was actually not part of the yarn shop hop, but we stopped there and I couldn't be happier. On the recommendation of Victoria, we stopped at the Artful U. It is the biggest gem of a shop. Heidi is the owner. She's so hospitable. Not only that, but she also dyes everything in the cottage. It was an incredible sight to see, and some place that I would love to go and just hang out for the afternoon and spend the afternoon knitting. And I think next time I'm in Washington, I definitely would do just that. After that, it was just time to kind of take it easy, spend time with my family on Whidbey Island, have some fun island adventures. And then my husband and I took off through the Olympic Peninsula, kind of touring around there before meeting back up with Kat and her husband in the Hood Canal area. And it was such a great trip, one that is long overdue. I grew up going to Whidbey Island basically every other year with my mom to visit her family, but as an adult, you get married and things get in the way. So this was my first trip back since, I think, 2015. And my husband's first visit to the island as well. So it was very special. Got to kind of share with him some old memories. It's one of the few places outside of Nashville that really has a home feel for me and has memories from childhood. And that was really special. And then we got to have some new adventures. I had never been to the Olympic Peninsula before, and build some new memories. So it was all around a really fantastic trip. But getting back from that trip, life just kind of hit a little hard. And the summer, as I mentioned earlier, was a little crazy, a little rocky. But I'm not going to get into all that because I don't want to be the Debbie Downer. You're just now getting caught up with me and I don't want to lay my problems out for you. So anyway, but a couple weeks ago, we did have an opportunity to head back to Michigan's Upper Peninsula where my husband is from. And that's a very special place for us. We get to unplug, unwind, and kind of recenter ourselves. Such a welcome week for us to do that. And I was able to spend a lot of time knitting. I also rediscovered my love of reading, which before knitting, there was reading. I think I would read at least one, if not two books a week before I started knitting. Now, I know a lot of you can knit and read at the same time. And also I can knit and listen to audiobooks, and I do that. I can't knit and read like an actual book. It just does not work. And I like to kind of just engross myself in the reading. So anyway, all that to say, my knitting has slowed down a little bit, but I do still have some finished objects, wrapping up the ones that you saw in the May, it's August, and you may not get this. I mean, it's like the end of August, so you may not be watching this even until September. But I do have some finished objects, wrapping up those May whips, and then I have whips as well, but I think I'm gonna divide them. So I think this episode is just gonna really be some finished objects. I'm not gonna lie, it's a little bit self-serving. That's because I want to get this episode out for you. I don't want to spend a lot of time editing. Longer the episode, the more editing. So we're going to do a little bit of a shorter episode, a two-parter. And that way, hopefully, this is Wednesday, and hopefully I'll have this out for you by Saturday for the Labor Day weekend. We shall see. If I don't, this is going to be a really awkward part of the show. Anyhow, so let's head into the knitting and start at the beginning with what I'm wearing. You will recognize this from previous podcast episodes of last summer. Actually, I think when I put this on the episode last summer was the first time that I really got any substantial new subscribers and views. So there is something about the Ranunculus effect. It is real for you podcasters out there. You want to get a lot of views, put on a Ranunculus. But I am wearing this today because it is 99 degrees outside. That's not the heat index. That's the actual temperature. I'm already pouring sweat. It is only 8:30 in the morning. And I just could not possibly wear anything woolen. Was not going to happen. So this is my summer Ranunculus. I have knit this in organic cotton and silk blend yarn. It is, I think, discontinued. Fibra Natura Papyrus. You may be able to find it at some closeout shops. I do not know. I know that to get enough of this color, which was just like the natural color, I think they called it gardenia, I had to order from 2 different shops. So just a heads up that I don't know that you can get this yarn, but I do really love this yarn, mostly because of the texture. It's a little bit less even than your traditional cotton yarns, and it was so much more comfortable on my fingers. So if you are like me and you have a hard time with knitting cotton, maybe look for something that has another fiber in it, or is organic cotton, because I've heard that organic tends to just generally be easier on your hands than Pima cotton. Okay, you know and love the Ranunculus. If you have been on Ravelry, you know this is one of the most knit patterns. I poo-pooed it. I'm gonna be honest with you. I was like, no, I don't need to do a Ranunculus. But then I saw, I think it was, oh gosh, I should have really checked this. Well-loved knits, well-made knits, well-loved knits. Anyway, she did an off-white Ranunculus. I fell in love. I decided I had to have it. So I knit this on an 18.5 stitch gauge. Here is the genius of the Ranunculus for those of you who have not knit it. All the sizes start exactly the same. So what that means is it's really easy to experiment with your gauge and yarn choice. You can knit the yoke and then decide what size you need to be knitting for the body. So you know already that I'm a swatcher. Will always be a swatcher because I'm just tired of knitting things that don't fit. So I knit the yoke and then knit my swatch after I got through the excitement and decided what size I would need to knit based on my stitch gauge. Okay, so how do you do the gauge math? I'm not an expert on gauge math. I would recommend to you Patty Lyon's book of knitting tricks. It's on my shelf back here. Knitting Bag of Tricks is what it's called. She walks you through how to do the gauge math way better than I ever can. So if you don't have that book, grab it. It's one that you want in your library, I promise. Once I figured out what my gauge was, I figured out what body size I wanted, how much positive ease I wanted. I believe I did 6 inches of positive ease, if I recall correctly. You can probably find, I may be wrong. There's a good chance that I'm wrong on that. You can go back and watch my old episode and tell me if I'm wrong. But I feel like I did 6 inches of positive ease when choosing my size. Now, I did something that a lot of people don't do on this. Most people just adjust for their stitch gauge, but I also adjusted for my row gauge by calculating my yoke depth based on the size that I was knitting. I've noticed that a lot of people who only account for a stitch gauge and go with a smaller stitch gauge end up with their kind of underarms being right in their armpit. As previously mentioned, Nashville, summer, pouring sweat. I do not like to have stuff right under my arm in the summer months. So I wanted something a bit looser and more airy for myself with a bit more drape in the underarm section, which is what I've done. On my sleeves, the Ranunculus pattern gives you a few sleeve options. For this one, I took the option to use the short rows to level out the sleeve. And then I used the bind off for the short sleeve. So I did add a little more length on the sleeve. I didn't go straight into the bind off. I added a little more length and then went with the bind off for the short sleeve, which is just a rolled edge, which I think is just darling. And on the hem, which you can't see, I actually did a folded hem instead of a rib hem. Just not the biggest fan of how this particular yarn looks in half twisted ribs, so I used a folded hem. Now a couple things. This garland here, that's a mistake. I purled instead of knitted. So if mine looks different from every other ranunculus that you've ever seen, that's why. We're just calling it an artistic liberty, but really it's a mistake. And the other thing that I will say is everybody talks about how easy this pattern is. I did not necessarily think it was that easy. I had to frog back a few rows in my yoke more than once because I got off kilter on my yarn overs or on my slip stitches. So yes, I mean, it in theory is easy from like here down, but here it does take a little concentration. So anyway, that is my story on my ranunculus. Like I said, you can go back and watch my episode last summer if you want more information. There's a slight chance it's on my Ravelry as well, but I'm not plugging my Ravelry because if you've looked at it, you will know it has not been updated in pretty much a year. So yeah, I'm just behind in my knitting life. It just is what it is. Anyhow, if you are ready, let's head into finished objects, shall we? Okay, this one, ooh. Okay, this one is a finished object. I'm counting it as a finished object, though I may make modifications to it. This one is a Lonely Skeins project. Okay, so I know you thought I forgot about this, and I admit I'm a bad knit-along leader because I have not been on Instagram. Just my social media fast this summer took me off of that. But That doesn't mean I haven't been thinking about it. I do still have a prize that I am lining up, and it is still going to be chosen. Winner, it's going to close at the end of September. I'm going to choose the winner in October. And I am still knitting with Lonely Skeins from my stash, making my way through. So on this one, this is the Salter Beanie from Ozetta, and I have knit this in Brusca from Rosa Pomar. Let me grab the yarn and the ball band so you can see. Okay, there's what the yarn looks like. Whoops. Out of practice, you forget where to show things. All right, and then this is 100% wool. It doesn't say what kind. It's a Portuguese, I guess it does, but it's in, okay, it's a Portuguese. It does say 2 native sheep breeds from Portugal. One is a Portuguese Merino and the other is a Saloa. I'm not sure. Okay, I am somebody who really loves a good graphic design, and I can just never get over the illustrations on Rosa Pomar's yarns and project bags. They're so cute. I just love that. I love the branding on that. This yarn is a fun story, actually. If you have watched Hannah G Knits, her podcast, she did a yarn stash video way back, probably before I even started podcasting, or maybe right about the same time. And she kind of went through some yarns that she had in her stash that she didn't know what she was going to do with, and asked people to kind of give her ideas on what to do. So she had this yarn. I messaged her and was like, I want that. Are you going to use it? If not, can I pay you for it? Will you mail it to me? And so she did. So pro tip, if a podcaster shows yarn and they have any left over from projects, you should probably just email them and ask if they're going to keep it or if you can have it, because she was very kind to agree to send it to me. I, of course, paid her for the yarn and for shipping. And I had, I think, just under 2 balls of the Brusca. So I decided to knit the Salter Beanie. It had been on my list for a while, but when I was in Washington with Kat, she was wearing a version that she had knit in Moda, and it was so cute. So I actually decided, though, that this is going to be a gift knit because I'm being true to my word. A friend saw this yarn in my stash, she fell in love with the color, and she wanted a beanie from it. So I'm gonna be selfless, which is not something that I am usually when it comes to my knitting, and gift her this beanie. But I'm not sure about the crown height. Okay, so if you look up the Salter Beanie on Ravelry, you may see some different crown heights, and some of them get a little long, and that's just because of row gauge issues. You know, while I am an avid swatcher, as I said, I'm not gonna swatch. I don't swatch for beanies or shawls or something like that. So I noticed that my row gauge was a little off once I kind of got into the beanie, did a quick steam block, and checked the row gauge. And because of that, I ended up shortening the increases or the decreases. So rather than decreasing every 3 rounds, I ended up decreasing every other round for the end of the top of the beanie. So lengthwise, it is where it is supposed to be for the pattern. According to the pattern, it is the height that it is supposed to be. I think it looks ridiculous on me. I'm gonna show you, but I'm kind of scared to. Yeah, I don't know. I just, for me, the crown height looks ridiculous. Also, I went with just the double folded brim rather than the triple folded brim for her. But I want her to try it on. And that's why I still have my stitch markers, and I've not woven in my ends yet. No problem with trying on beanies in the middle of your episode. I've not woven in my ends yet because I do want her to try it on, and I am not opposed to kind of going back in and reworking the crown of the beanie in order to have it be something that she's going to wear and enjoy for a long time. Some feedback on this yarn. I was a little nervous at first on if I was going to be able to stand it kind of next to skin or somebody else would. I'm hopeful she'll be okay with it. I wore it kind of around the house for a couple hours just to test it myself, and I was fine with it. So I'm hopeful she will be okay with the yarn. It is a woolen spun yarn. And some of the comments that I've seen about this yarn, sorry, it is covered in Georgie cat hair. That's awkward. Luckily she's not allergic to cats. Anyway, some of the feedback that I had seen about this yarn is that it breaks easily. Now, I didn't have that experience at all, but I am used to knitting with woolen spun yarns. I prefer a woolen spun yarn, and I also don't tug on my yarn very much. I tend to have a little bit of a light touch with my yarn, and I think that's just because I have kind of gotten accustomed to knitting with unspun or woolen spun yarns that are just not necessarily as, don't have the tensile strength that something with a whole lot of tightly plied fibers has. Overall though, I loved this yarn, and I love this color. It's just so mossy and pretty. I think too, I cast this on immediately when we got back from Washington, and I think the other thing about this is that it reminded me so much of our time kind of in the Pacific Northwest and the Olympic Peninsula, especially the Hoh rainforest. It just has that like green moss feeling that is the forest of the Pacific Northwest. So yeah, this beanie, I'm gonna call it a finished object for now, but we shall see. I'll keep you posted on what the feedback is on the crown once I am able to have her try this on. She's a musician, she tours, so I don't know when I will see her again, but it is here waiting for her. All right, moving on to finished objects. The rest of these you have seen in the whip updates, but there's a fun twist for the first one. And that is because I have brought this is a pattern that I've knit twice. In fact, it's the vest number 2 spring edition. It was my first project my first garment that I ever knit, and I brought that to show you so that we can compare the difference on how far Haley has come in her knitting journey over the past couple of years. So I'm gonna first show you the old one, and then I'm going to show you the new one and talk through the differences there. Okay, this is the old one, and after I show this to you, I'm pretty sure this is gonna I'm gonna cull this one because I will honestly never wear it again. I haven't worn it in a long time. All right, so this is the old one, and now from afar you're thinking, hey, that's not so bad. But a few things. For one, look how deep that V is. This V comes all the way down between my breasts. Like that's crazy. This is called a row gauge issue, guys, because that's not supposed to be that low. The other thing that cracks me up is at the time when I was knitting this, guess who did not know the difference between regular 1x1 and twisted rib? Look at this. Okay, so you've got regular 1x1 here, and you've got half twisted rib here. It's just kind of funny. So on the row gauge issue, and it's also really just like quite wide and has no shape or body to speak of, but the row gauge issue is because I knit this with a DK Pima cotton yarn and a mohair held together. So you've got like a super dense fabric, but also just no way I was gonna meet gauge because it is designed for a fingering and a mohair held together. So anyway, this is version number 1, which we shall now retire as a beginner knit that I will never wear again. But I gave it another go because I did really want a gray V-neck sweater or V-neck vest in my wardrobe. So version number 2 is finished and has gotten much more wear. So first off, the neckline falls where it should, which is about an inch higher. which is much more appropriate for a V-neck vest, and just one kind of rib. All right, some other details on this. I knit this in my Holst Supersoft and KFO Mohair held together at a 19 stitch gauge. Row gauge on this was a little off. It was 27. If memory serves me, the pattern calls for 25 rows. So I was a little off on that, and I decided to roll with that because I knew, first of all, that I wanted the shallower V-neck from my experience with the first one. And also for me, armholes are always too long. Even when I nail the row gauge in a vest, I have a very short armhole depth. So I was really pleased actually with the shorter row gauge in how it affected the fit. Now, if you watched the May episode, I talked about that I actually knit this twice because I decided to try to get fancy and put in some waist shaping and tapering, and it worked out terribly. So, and also I did really bad gauge math the first time around. So I effectively had knit the whole thing, then ripped it all the way back to where I separated where I joined in the round and knit it again. So this has now been knit, I guess technically 3 times. But overall, super pleased with this. Decided to crop it a little bit from what the pattern suggests, but that's just because I wear a lot of high-waisted pants, and my jeans are mid-rise to high-rise. So I wanted to just have this be a little bit of a more versatile piece for my work wardrobe, and it definitely is that. Anyway, also the other part that cracked me up, I don't know, can we see? No, I guess you can't see it. Oh yeah, here we go. Looking back at how I used to weave in ends, they are so visible. And then here it's like, no, there's no, you cannot see. Those types of things are so funny to me looking back. It's those small details, guys, that are just the difference between having been knitting for a couple months and having been knitting for a couple years. Oh, I also chose the vest number 2 spring edition, which is very similar to the Stockholm V-neck because I liked the shoulder. That is the English tailored shoulder, I think is what we're calling that these days in the podcast world. And I just really love that shoulder construction. I think it looks so nice and neat. I am a big fan. So that is my vest number 2 spring edition. Oh, I said that like you should know that the designer is my favorite things knitwear, but I feel like you probably already do know that. Somebody is mowing the lawn. Not only is that disruptive to this podcast, so you're just gonna have to deal with the lawn mowing in the background, but also, who is crazy enough to be mowing the lawn in 99-degree weather? Not me. I don't mow my lawn, we hire somebody for that. Funny story, East Nashville, the neighborhood that I live in, the saying has always been, we'll steal your heart and your lawnmower. So I learned long ago, don't bother buying a lawnmower, it's gonna get stolen. So we have a lovely yard guy who's been with us for several years now that we adore. Anyway, okay, moving on. Sorry. Way down a rabbit hole on lawn mowing there. Would you like to hear how I feel about watering the lawn or weeding the flower bed? Because I can talk about that too. I have strong opinions. Aren't you glad I'm back? Okay, so moving on to the next finished object. This is a big one. It is, ta-da, my Anthe shawl. Okay, if you know me, you know that I love Moonstruck knit shawls. Natasha Hornby. I said I would never be a shawl knitter, and I confess to you, I still don't think I really know how to wear shawls, but I think I have finally understood the joy of shawl knitting, particularly her shawls. I think part of that joy in shawls is that you can really combine a lot of different stitches, a lot of different textures, and it kind of keeps your attention going. Now, I still will never enjoy when the rows get really long and I have to go back and it takes me 30 minutes or longer per row, but I'm starting to get it. And in particular, Natasha Hornby, if you've knit any of her shawls, you will know that she does love to combine direction as well as stitch pattern and her mosaic. Mosaic is kind of her signature thing, but always in her mosaic shawls, she does also have some sort of textured stitch pattern. It's typically not just a garter stitch. In this pattern, in the Anthe, she uses a hurdle stitch. Let's see if I can show you. And she knit hers in, I basically stole the colors. I just really liked them. She knit hers in a marled yarn as the main color, and so did I. And now her marled yarn is a little bit darker, a little bit lower contrast. Mine is black and white, so it has a little bit more contrast there. And then also she used black and gold. What I found what yarns did I use? We should probably talk about that. So these were yarns purchased at Rhinebeck, which, by the way, I'm really sad to share that I don't think I'll be making the Rhinebeck trip this year. It is such a bummer. It hurts my heart because I was so looking forward to meeting some folks who I've connected with online this year that were there last year and I didn't get to meet, but it just is what it is, just the timing in life, and this year it's just not going to work. But anyway, last year at Rhinebeck, I knew I wanted to knit this shawl and decided to set out looking for yarns to use. And so the yarn that I chose for the main color is Yin Yang yarn. Nope. It is Yin Yang. That's the name of the yarn. And it's from Loop Fibers. And this is, let me tell you what this colorway is. This is Yang. Okay, so information about this yarn. This is 100% merino. I think it does not say superwash, so I'm assuming that it's not superwash, though I can't really guarantee that. It is, looks like 4 plies with 3 white plies and 1 black ply. So it does lean more toward the white side of the spectrum. If you find their yarns, you'll also find ones that lean the other direction, which is hence the yin yang. So I'm assuming yin is going to be the name of the one that is mostly black with 1 white ply in it that leans more toward the darker side of the color spectrum. So I really liked this yarn. It's soft, it's easy to work with, it did not split, it was really super comfortable to knit with, but I don't think it was the right yarn for this pattern. This shawl is pretty weighty. I feel like it's originally designed in Jamison's, whichever one has Spindrift, it's that one. And I think that's more of a woolen spun. And I think I just didn't have a great main color choice. Now it's beautiful, but I don't think it really has the lightness of a shawl that I like to have. It's quite dense and quite heavy. But that's okay, we're rolling with it. And then my contrast color in the gold is 80% Romney. Hold on, let me look and see who is mowing to see how close they're gonna get. Okay, that's funny. It is my yard guy who's mowing, but he's mowing the neighbor across the street. So we may have to pause if he gets too close to my house. And I'm gonna have to go outside and tell him that he's nuts for mowing in the middle of the week in 99-degree weather. Anyway, so this is my gold contrast color. And this is from Distelfink Fiber. This is 80% Romney, 20% Border Leicester Merino. No, wrong. 80% Romney Border Leicester, so I'm assuming that's a crossbreed, and then 20% Merino. What I really liked about this yarn and why I chose it is that it does have plies of different colors. So you've got like a natural white and a natural gray, and that creates a gorgeous depth in this yarn. And I obviously did my yarn math poorly because I have a whole skein of this left over, and I think I have actually like maybe half of another skein. So I really overestimated the yarn that I would need for this. And my black is just my Holst Garn Supersoft cones. Those are kind of a mainstay for just some easy to grab contrast colors. So what's interesting about this mosaic is that it actually combines garter stitch and also stockinette. So if you look in the middle there, these larger squares, these are stockinette, and the rest, these smaller ones, are in garter. And that's what allows kind of those colors to pop. Now, when you don't do that and you start to work all of the squares in stockinette, you lose the bumps. So don't get arrogant. Pay attention to the pattern. Don't assume you know what you're doing. But I decided not to correct it and just to leave it because I didn't really think it was that impactful. Also, mostly this part of the shawl, you're not going to see very much. The other detail on this is that it does have a lovely little edge, and most of Natasha's patterns also have this. On my Lune shawl, she has some tassels. On the, oh God, what's the really popular one that we all just did? The Artist. It's like a lovely I-cord, a big thick I-cord edge. So she always has some sort of fun detail around the edge. This is a picot edge, my first time really knitting picot. I've done Channel Island bind off, but this is my first true picot, and I think it's just a lovely, lovely little edge there. So I am pretty pleased with this. It's huge, guys, huge. It's probably the biggest shawl that I've knit to date. So again, still trying to figure out what the styling looks like on a shawl like this. It's not in my comfort zone by any means. Also not comfortable in the temperature. But is it this? Like how are we styling these kind of rounded crescent shaped shawls? I don't know. We'll keep working on it. We've got obviously a little time before we're gonna be there and need to style a shawl with this heat. All right, one more finished object. You guys, I have to tell you, this one I have worn and worn and worn. So if you see some fuzziness and some pilling, that is because it is in very high rotation in my wardrobe. I wear this at least once a week. My office is frigid, so it can work. And there's a reason that everybody who knits this pattern says it's one of their favorites. I know that Andrea from LA shared this, and I'm gonna say I feel the same way. This is one of my favorite things that I've knit. So this is the DRK Everyday Sweater. If you recall, in the last episode, I shared with you about the yarn. Hold on. I knit this, and this is all I have left, so I can't show you what a full skein looks like. I knit this in Lavender Lune. This is their Mill Spun Grulla Sport, Grulla, I don't know, Sport, in just the natural base. Now, she's known for her hand dyeing. You all know I'm not the biggest, I don't have the patience that hand dye requires for large projects, for the most part. So I just bought the natural colorway. That being, oh, I did notice recently, and it may not be there by the time that you see this episode, but Black Mountain Yarn Shop on their website has 4 skeins of this left in the olive, like a dark olive colorway. So that's the only other place that I've seen this for sale. Yarns like this are why you go to fiber festivals. I bought this at the now infamous Wool and Folk last year, and it stopped me in my tracks, and I instantly just like gobbled it up. So anyway, just a heads up on that. Now, this yarn had a lot of variation in it, which I noticed pretty early on. First of all, you've got color variation. I did notice when I was in the shop that some of the colors were lighter and some of them were darker. But then the other thing that I noticed once I started knitting with it, I'm trying to show you here, is that there's also a lot of thickness variation. So I had some areas that were pretty thin and some areas that were pretty thick. And it not only varied within the skein, but it varied between skeins. So some of the skeins had much more underspun spots, and some of the skeins had darker areas. And so I did actually, despite the fact that I said I don't have patience for hand-dyed yarn, I did actually decide to treat this like a hand-dyed yarn. Now, I'm working in a circular yoke with no stitch pattern in it, so that was very easy. I just used helical knitting to alternate my skeins. And you do still see some variation. It's actually much more pronounced on camera than it is in real life. You can still see where some of the skeins traded over, but overall, it's not noticeable, and it's really not noticeable when I'm wearing it. And I kind of love the texture variation in the places. I think it just really adds something. This is the back, and there's a really fun section like right here. I think it just adds a little bit of interest to an otherwise pretty plain sweater. This pattern was very simple to follow, very well written. It's just your kind of basic circular yoke sweater, knit at a, I think 21 stitch gauge if I'm correct. And yeah, I mean, I decided to shorten my sleeves. So my sleeves are kind of like about right here. My goal for today is to actually take some finished object photos. Are you shocked? To be able to put them in. I don't make promises. Anyway, don't hold me to that. My sleeves end about right here, and that is simply because I was terrified that I was not gonna have enough yarn for long sleeves. In hindsight, I probably could have added long sleeves, but honestly, I have really enjoyed the sleeves being on the more cropped length. In Nashville, wearing this in the office with a pair of slacks, it's perfect. And then I can still layer it over a button-down shirt and kind of cuff the sleeves up to where they end there. I did originally add some additional length to the yoke because I was really concerned. It's a very short yoke. I did subsequently end up taking that length back out and rejoining. So I would say if you knit this pattern, even though the yoke seems very short, just trust it. It's where it's supposed to land for how the circular yoke is going to spread out on your shoulders. Now I have very narrow shoulders, and mine spreads maybe even a little more than it should. So I probably wish I had added maybe another ½ inch to my collar just so that it was more of a mock neck. But it pretty well sits like right at the top of my clavicle here. So overall, I am so supremely pleased with not only this sweater, but also this yarn. It was a great, I generally get maybe a little bored when I'm just knitting stockinette in the round like this, but I have to say having such an interesting, just like incredibly special yarn and also employing the helical knitting really like kept me going. So anyway, just a plug for the DRK Everyday Sweater. Oh, that is my first Andrea Mowry pattern that I've knit actually. And yeah, I am interested to possibly knit some more. I'm probably gonna stay away from the tessellated series because practically everybody who has knit that talks about it being a painful knitting experience, not because of the pattern writing, but just because of the texture and the small gauge. But if you have favorite Andrea Mowry patterns that I should check out other than the DRK Everyday, because that has been knit, definitely let me know. Well, I think that brings us to the end of finished objects for today. And it's a good thing we split it because I'm looking at the timestamp on the video and already this is really not a very short video like I had thought that it would be. I did ramble on a little bit about my feelings about mowing the lawn. So, so I'm gonna wrap up here for today and then work on a whip video to get out for you in the... Are you saying... Oh, okay. You saying goodbye? I will work on a whip video for you within the next couple of weeks. Oh, one more thing that I wanted to mention. First of all, I want to apologize to those of you who have made comments to ask me for help on knitting through or working through your patterns that I've knit and you're asking for my advice. Please, if you are in that moment in your pattern while you are actively knitting and you don't know what to do next, or you want to know what I did in that circumstance, email me or send me an Instagram DM. I don't have YouTube notifications turned on my phone, so I don't... She is just very sassy and giving me love bites today, which I don't necessarily perceive as love, but she does. Anyway, I don't have Instagram notifications turned on my phone, so I sometimes miss those, but if you email me or send me an Instagram DM, that's going to be, when you're in that stuck moment, the fastest way that I can kind of give you some advice or some guidance, knowing that I'm no expert. I'm just one lady who knits. In any case, all right, well, I think that's where we're going to leave it for today. Thank you so much for spending time with me, and it's great to connect with you again. I will chat with you again soon. You ready? You want to go do something else? Okay, bye.